Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joanne. Yes, I sound all choked up. I've had to have a COVID test just to make sure that I'm okay. I won't be live streaming for the next few days while I'm like this. I'll do recorded content, a little bit of recorded content. But yeah, I think it's a combination of night shift, my body going into shock, finishing uni, all of there's a whole combination of things. I think my body's just uh, telling me to rest up. So um, anyway, this is really interesting. What I want to know is there is a case in the Queensland Court of Appeal at the moment that really could uh, really affect the way that journalists deal with confidential sources. Journalist loses Court of Appeal to keep confidential sources secret and could be jailed for up to 5 years. This is pretty amazing stuff, because we know that journalists rely on confidential sources all the time, and journalists tend to not reveal their sources. So a journalist could be forced to reveal a confidential source or face jail time in a legal case rarely seen in Queensland. The journalist, known only as F, had argued in the Court of Appeal that he should be protected from revealing a source under a public interest immunity, but it was dismissed. In 2018, the journalist received a tip-off from a police officer about an impending raid of a murder suspect who was also the subject of a joint counter-terrorism investigation. The journalist dispatched a reporter and camera operator to the address, and they managed to catch the arrest on camera. The leak of information was considered a serious breach by authorities, and Queensland's Crime and Corruption Commission launched an investigation in how it was obtained by the media. The journalist refused to reveal the police source to the CCC and appealed against a directive to expose the informant, citing his ethical obligation to protect sources' identities. The journalist argued in the Court of Appeal he shouldn't have to reveal his confidential source, citing a public interest immunity. But the court found there was no protection under the law for the journalist's confidential source, and that public interest immunity could not be applied to the case. The ruling allows the CCC to compel the journalist to reveal their source or face criminal charges, including 5 years in jail. Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance spokeswoman Michelle Ray said journalists relied on information from confidential sources to hold those in power to account. Effectively, what it means in Queensland is that journalists can be jailed for doing their job. This is about the community's right to know. If we think back in our history, the Fitzgerald inquiry, that was journalists talking to workers who came forward and said, "This is happening, I don't think it's right." It's a principle known around the world that journalists can never reveal the identity of a confidential source. Lawyers for journalist F are considering the decision and whether they will seek leave to appeal in the High Court to fight the ruling. Queensland is the only jurisdiction in Australia that does not have shield laws to protect journalists from having to reveal their sources. The state government will introduce a bill into Parliament this week to introduce shield laws. But Queensland Attorney General Shannon Fentiman said laws would initially only apply to court proceedings, not orders by the CCC. It means the laws would not protect journalist F should the CCC continue to pursue the journalist to reveal his source. Ms. Fentiman said there may be changes to include CCC powers in the future. Most other jurisdictions in shield laws do not apply to corruption proceedings, but we will be doing that work to make sure that Queenslanders and journalists are protected. I think people will be pleased with the work we've done. They want strong shield laws that protect Queenslanders, and we'll do the work next year to look at how we can expand those protections to the CCC jurisdiction. So tell me what you think. Should the journalist be forced to reveal his source? It was obviously very big information that he had. And if you were the journalist, would you give up your source, or would you risk jail? The other thing I want to share with you, I think for me, one of the worst fears that we had was having COVID in our remote communities, and the worst fears have happened. A positive COVID case recorded in a remote Northern Territory community. So there's been 2 new cases, including first in a remote community. A 30-year-old woman from the community of Robinson River in the Gulf of Carpentaria tested positive on Monday. She is a household contact of 43-year-old fully vaccinated Aboriginal man from Katherine, who also returned a positive result. Greater Katherine entered a 72-hour lockdown as of 6 p.m. Chief Minister Michael Gunner said the development was undoubtedly the most serious update for the Northern Territory since the start of the pandemic. He said there was no clear link between the first case, the 43-year-old man, and the outbreak in Greater Darwin and Katherine last week. He said the last positive cases connected to Darwin and Katherine outbreak were in isolation, days before the latest tests became infectious. The length of time between cases in Katherine and the lack of clear link means there may be seeding in Katherine. Mr. Gunner said a rapid assessment team had been sent to Robinson River, a community of around 350 people, 800 kilometres east of Katherine. The team includes health experts, police, and extra vaccine. Mr. Gunner said 77% of people in Robinson River were fully vaccinated and 87% had had their first dose. He said everyone who is eligible but not yet had their first or second dose of vaccine will be offered it. And a 3-day lockdown for Robinson River and surrounding homelands will begin at 6 p.m. Mr. Gunner said a test and vaccination blitz for Robinson River would take place over the coming days. Another team and extra vaccines are being sent to a larger community of Burralua, around 150 kilometres from Robinson River. Mr. Gunner said contact was being made with surrounding homelands to advise people to stay where they are. He said the response to the outbreak would follow the vaccine surge plans outlined by his government last week. It's not a scenario we wanted, but we knew this day would come. We've swung into action to save lives. Acting Chief Health Officer Charles Payne said authorities had been concerned about potential new cases in Katherine linked to last week's outbreak and low testing rates over the weekend. Mask rules for the town were extended for the 3rd time this afternoon as authorities await wastewater results. He said that it was possible that there had been significant transmission in Katherine since the outbreak, and the recording of a case in Robinson River was of grave concern. He said the other communities' relative high vaccination rate was encouraging, but the rate in other communities are not adequate to hold back this kind of outbreak. We're in very challenging times, there's no question about it. I wouldn't want anyone in the Territory to be under any illusions. We're now in a fight to get on top of this. So, our remote communities are where our most vulnerable people live, and it's very scary that there is a case now in a remote community. However, it looks like they've flung into action to try and to rectify that. So I'm really happy to hear that. So that's all I've got for you today, or at the moment. I may be back later with another update. I've got more tabs and everything to look at. But tell me what you think in the comments below about journalists being forced to out confidential sources and the response from the Northern Territory government with the remote community. As I said, it's the worst fear. We saw it in New South Wales just recently with that community, and it's just escaped me, and I really apologise, where they had to set up the vans, so we've seen it happen. But the Northern Territory and the top end of WA and the top end of Queensland, where all the remote communities are at highest risk. So hopefully they can get on top of COVID in those communities and keep them at bay. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. For some reason, usually when you log into your studio, it shows you've had an increase of subscribers. I don't know. I've heard lots of people complain about YouTube, people being unsubscribed from channels. I don't know. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for joining me, and I'm sorry for all the camera stuff. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you again later. Bye for now.